Hey, okay, so I'm driving to the store, but I wanted to just say something about something I was thinking, basically thinking out loud. And so I made a video before about Prime Minister Carney's speech at Davos and my opposition to exactly, really what that meant and what he was signaling there. But recently I heard another speech by Prime Minister Harper in which he essentially said that the problems that Canada faces cannot be blamed on the United States. Or let's say blamed on Donald Trump. And understand what he's saying there. It does make sense if you consider the context in which he's saying. He's saying that Canada really, fundamentally has issues that Donald Trump apparently was able to exploit, right? And so Canada has put itself in a position to where, it cannot collectively be exploited in this type of way, particularly economically by an American president. And I get what he's saying, I understand it. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand that, and he said it's not about emotion. It's true, it's not about emotion, but I also think that that argument in itself really is emotionally tinged, because I hoped, because Donald Trump is Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump is an absolute disaster. He's been terrible for U.S.-Canada relations, unfortunately. He's about Donald Trump. He just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't care about long-term interests. He just doesn't care about anything. So you cannot expect Donald Trump, because Donald Trump can't do it. I really just think he does not have the intellectual cognitive ability to really be a good steward of any relations, especially U.S.-Canada relations. So he can't do it. But if he can't do it, and members of his administration won't do it, I'd always hoped that, their Canadian counterparts would understand the importance of the relationship and at least act as the adults, act as caretakers, and put themselves in a position to keep the relationship alive so that there's something to work with after Donald Trump, and relations can be normalized. See, that's the hope. And that's the practical, hope. It has nothing to do with emotions. Especially considering the fact that when people say, oh, but the United States is this, and the United States is that, and Prime Minister Harper even referred to the United States and not Donald Trump. And it's like, well, but at the end of the day, it really is Donald Trump. And I said it in the last video, is that, if you look at U.S. policy anywhere, but particularly in regard to Canada, it has not gone, or does not go through any process that you would expect policy to go through. It comes from the mind of Donald Trump. His whims, it has everything to do with his personality, which is he is very likely to be a malignant narcissist. And his lack of intelligence, his lack of intellectual curiosity, his lack of understanding. And so it just comes from the mind of Donald Trump. U.S. policy toward Canada right now, in any realm, is not the result of some sort of broad consensus amongst the U.S. Political establishment or the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy does not support what Donald Trump does with Canada, not even the Republican Party. And so this is not some sort of, what Donald Trump is doing is not some sort of, long-term, broad, fundamental change in U.S. direction toward the world, or especially Canada. So, I hoped that Canadian officials would be the adults and be caretakers of the relationship with this understanding, but apparently no, this is not the case, and it's really, it's unfortunate. I think it's frustrating, because it's important to understand, I understand the importance that Canada would place, particularly now, of diversifying away from so much reliance on the U.S. economically. I get it. But that relationship is mutually beneficial. And again, it's important to understand that it's mutual. So as Canada moves away from the United States, of course, moves away from Canada. What does that mean? As Canada diversifies, the U.S. is going to have to find other markets for certain goods that it generally would have relied on Canada for. Again, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. I don't think that's good, as far as divergence. I don't think that such a divergence as Prime Minister Carney, detailed in his speech in Davos was a good thing. But I understand what Canada's doing, and I'm not saying that, there shouldn't be some sort of diversification away from so much reliance on the U.S. economically. But the fact is that, emotions and politics aside, Donald Trump is temporary. Politics are temporary, right? But like it or not, we, the United States and Canada, and my background, I am American, but also my mother's family's from Canada. So, again, politics and Donald Trump are temporary, right? But the United States and Canada will be neighbors forever. that's not going to change. And so, you know, the relationship between the two countries is going to be extremely important for both forever. That's never going to change. And so I think that we need to overall work closer together and have better relations with one another than what we see right now, this sort of divergence, you know. And it can't be tit for tat. I understand, you know, the emotional reaction in Canada and the sort of idea that there should be some sort of tit for tat, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's going to happen either way, because inertia is going to win out. I mean, again, because of proximity and, you know, just economic gravity. I mean, the U.S. has tremendous economic gravity, and, you know, obviously the U.S. and Canada border each other. So I think that relations will return to normal because they have to, and I think that what we're hearing right now really is just rhetoric that is going to give way to inertia in a couple of years when Donald Trump is gone. But we need to have something to work with when Donald Trump is gone, so, you know, we can work to repair relations. And so that's just what I think about this, and I'm hoping every day, as I always have since I was a child. Again, I've always been very interested in both U.S. and Canadian affairs, be it economic, political, social. And so I've always very closely followed, you know, events in both countries and between both countries. You know, I'm very proud of the fact that I am American. I'm also very proud of the fact that I have that very deep and direct, you know, connection to Canada. So that being said, you know, hopefully cooler has prevailed and we'll get to a point where we can normalize relations and things will be steady again. But, you know, unfortunately, we have 3 years left of Donald Trump, and hopefully not, but, you know, we'll see what happens. Okay, anyway, see you.